Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Doctor Who, as well as the latest episode of Charmed. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I go to a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Doctor Who, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Charmed. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Doctor Who. So in this episode, we have Yaz and the team going back in time to see her grandmother, because her grandma kind of didn't tell her, like, she had a perception like, oh, this is my nan's story, and like I know it's a way. I just want to see it firsthand, because there's a lot of stuff that her grandmother doesn't want to talk about. The fact of the matter is there's a broken watch that she gave her. I love the whole thing about, like, you're my favorite granddaughter, even though Yaz's sister is literally sitting there and their mom is like, stop it, I told you about saying stuff like that. It's so good. But the story ended up not being what anyone thought it was going to be on many different fronts. For one, this is about the Thajarians, who are these well-known assassins. They are literally, they evolved themselves into be the deadliest assassins. And it was kind of interesting because the moment the Doctor got there, she kind of linked up with them. I guess it's just kind of like maybe whatever, like, time thing that they connect to, she kind of connected to it on some level, I'm thinking. But it's really hard to say. But essentially, Yaz ends up finding out, that's one thing. But then on another side of the thing, Yaz ends up finding out, it's like, oh, her grandmother is not actually marrying her grandfather, that she's marrying a guy named Prim. And she's like, whoa, what's up with this? Wait a minute. And it kind of shocks her, because it's like, my entire life I felt like, oh, my grandmother married my grandfather. It's kind of like this beautiful story, and that was just it to it. But it turns out it's like, no, she was going to be with someone else first. But obviously the Doctor's telling her, like, oh yeah, we got to be careful here, because you don't want to interfere too much, which is interesting, because I could be remembering this wrong, so do correct me. But I think the last time we ever dealt with a storyline like this was with Rose, right? Because the whole situation with her dad, I mean, it feels a little reminiscent of that in that regard, because I don't think anyone else, any of the Doctor's other companions, have ever going into their own timeline. Maybe they haven't, I'm just not remembering, because Rose is the one that kind of pops up in my head with that whole situation. Because like I said, when you actually think about Rose's episode and compare it to this one, it's like there's a lot of similarities and certain themes that are kind of kept, but I'll kind of break that down as they progress through the episode. But sadly, this is during the same time as the partition of India. Now, to be fair, I don't really know that too much about it, but it seems like, just from the context clues, basically India is being divided between, like, Muslim and Hindu, like that divide, and that's the struggle that Umbra and Prim have in this episode, because it's like they're from these two different groups, but it's like before this one day, this divide, we were all part of the same group, and it just like one day divides us. It changed that much? It's like, no, nothing changed. Even Prim was saying that. It's like, we haven't changed in that time. But his brother Manesh was kind of like, no, we have changed. Things have changed. He was kind of all psyched for it, because he had information about it ahead of time, and just kind of like, no, you live here, we live here. This is how things are. He, for him, that was the future. And it's like, yeah, this togetherness is like, no, the divide is what matters, and it's such a sad thing, because we also learn, about Prim. The fact of the matter is his eldest brother signed up, in the military with him, but they were in Singapore and his brother died. That's actually where he first met the demons and stuff like that. So there's a lot to kind of digest about this episode in that regard. It's kind of an interesting thing, because Graham kind of pointed something out that I thought was kind of really insightful, because Yaz is like, I guess I don't know my grandma like I thought I did. But he was like, yeah, she's entitled to have her secrets. Like, all of us kind of have our secrets. We never know that we're living our true, like, because the thing is, it's such an interesting thing. Like, obviously this is me delving into it a lot more, but like the whole aspect of like your truth being it comes down to perspective, because it's like, you can think you are living your truth just because you're living your lives. Like, that's the only truth we know, because we are living our lives. We're looking at it from the inside. We don't have the outside perspective, but at the end of the day, it kind of doesn't matter. As long as you kind of live in the moment right now, that's what matters the most, as long as you're kind of being true to yourself in that regard. Maybe in the outside, it's not the truest thing, but it's true to you in that moment. And that's what matters most. And that whole aspect of perspective, that's how I interpret it, was that whole, and I thought that was such a fascinating discussion, from Graham. I love the little moment of like everybody kind of dividing up, like Graham and Ryan go with Prim, while the Doctor and Yaz go with Ambrim and her mom, and I love that whole conversation of like the doctor's like, oh, I never experienced, was a part of something like this as a man, and Yaz is like, oh, you and your jokes, doctor, and she's like, right, yeah, any references to me, you know, body and gender regeneration are just a joke. She's like, I am such a comedian. I love that. I thought it was kind of pretty neat. And I also love that line from the doctor who was like, gold star for Ryan. She's like, wait, was I keeping up points? She's like, oh man, I completely forgot about that. A little carryover joke from the last episode. I thought that was kind of interesting. To be fair, makes you wonder, had the doctor been doing it even before last episode? But nonetheless, I still thought it was kind of pretty neat, kind of bringing that over. And it's like, oh, this is a running gag, but I forgot about it. You know, it's such a neat little thing. What's also sad about this situation, kind of bringing the whole energy down a little bit, sorry. See, actually kind of a sad episode in the grand scheme of things. I should have kind of brought that up before. But it's the whole aspect of like, oh yeah, like Umbrim's mom kept being like, oh yeah, this is cursed, blah, 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 blah. I guess it's just more so because of what's happening in India while they're trying to get married. And it's like, you're really trying to do that. She's like, let me find you a good Muslim man or something like that, rather than just, and it's sad just because she has to tell her mom, no, like I love Prim, like, why should this divide us? We love each other. And her mom just keeps thinking it's a cursed day. The fact is that demons are showing up and everything like that. It's kind of like, yeah, these are the signs. Even a watch dropping later on, which I guess in the grand scheme of things, you're like, okay, so it makes sense why this is kind of like this, you know. It plays into the whole omens of like, oh yeah, it's a cursed day. But it also makes sense later on why Yaz's grandma never fixed the watch, because what it symbolized. Because it's like, it's stopping at that moment. It's like, it's supposed to, you know, represent our moment in time. And so it's kind of like fixing it would mean kind of undoing that, like undoing what makes it special, that moment in time it represented. Because we sadly end up finding out, for one, we do find out like the Thagerians are not the bad guys in this case, or at least not anymore. Like, they were the assassins that they were, but now they've subsequently changed over a new leaf, at least a while back. Essentially, they were all about that until they came back to the world, and their world was gone, and all that's left of it is that dust. The dust that the doctor was trying to examine is like, it overloaded the sonic screwdriver. Also, the fact of the matter is, there's like, oh, there's so much to it. Like, she couldn't figure it out because there was so much to it, and it's like, that represents all that's left of the world. Like, all that it was, all the people that were there, kind of all have come together in that one dust. And that's such a fascinating thing. It actually kind of reminds me of the Class situation. Was it the Closet of Souls? What they call, or no, the Cabinet of Souls. Like, it reminds me of that, which is such a neat little thing. I wonder, was that inspiration for this or not? Probably not, but I'd like to think it was. And I think that's kind of a neat comparison, you know, kind of comparing it to Class in that regard. So I was like, that's actually kind of sad. And that whole thing of like, our people died not having anyone there to honor them. They essentially died alone, and it's kind of like, so they left their assassin days behind them, and now, you know, they spent the rest of the time just honoring those that died, each and every one. But eventually they did it for so long, for 100 generations, and now that's all they know how to do. And so they've been doing that all across time. They're not here to kill anybody. They didn't kill the holy man. They're here for those who die alone, to kind of honor them, to basically remember them. So basically, you know, take that pain, but make it so that like that person isn't alone in death, you know, in their time, that, you know, they are remembered and they're honored. And I thought that was it's kind of a very beautiful thing. Because sadly we end up finding out that Manej, I'll get to that, that Prim, today is the day he dies, and now it makes sense to you guys. It's like, that's why her grandma didn't want to ever talk about this day. Literally, the day that should be the happiest day of her life is the saddest day of her life, because it's like, on the day she's getting married, the man she loved died, and it's like, of course she didn't want to talk about it. And also why she keeps the watch the way it is, because it reminds her of like if she fixed it, it would kind of erase him in some shape or form. That those breaks in the watch represent, like I said, that moment in time for them. And I think it's such a beautiful thing, yet so heartbreaking at the same time. And this is where I also talked about, I talked about other comparisons to the Rose episode. Rose dealt with the same situation because her dad, she couldn't save her dad, like, no matter what she do, because, like, if she saved her dad, it would ultimately kind of break time. And in Yaz's case, it would too, because if Prim lived, that means that Yaz's grandmother never would have met Yaz's grandfather and eventually had her. And I love that whole thing of the doctor being like there can't be a universe with no Yaz. It's just not. I love the Doctor putting it like that, but it's still kind of like that heartbreaking thing, because obviously Yaz was kind of like, no, because like I said, because she had a preconceived notions of like, oh, this is the story that went down, because obviously like her grandmother wouldn't tell all the story, because she even said later, like, when you're older, because it's like, for one, that's such a heartbreaking story, and it just, like, I guess she didn't want Yaz's perception of her to change, but then Yaz kind of, her perception did, but I think in a good way, in the sense of, like, you went through so much, and I'm so grateful to be here because of just, like, just how much, happened in your life, and you still managed to, come here. I mean, it's even interesting, her being in Sheffield in the first place. It's like, yeah, like, she made a promise long ago. She was like, I'm going to pick a random spot on the map, and we go there, and it's like, that's how they ended up in Sheffield in the first place. And it's like, it's sad that, like, it took sad circumstances to lead them to go there. I mean, maybe under happy circumstances they could have ended up there, but it took sad circumstances to lead them down the path to where they would be in Sheffield. And it's the most heartbreaking thing in this regard, because you have the whole, like, it's that thing of, like, you have to sit there knowing, like, Graham and Ryan are spending time with Prim, and it's like, they know what's going to happen to him, and it still breaks their heart. You even have the whole situation of, like, Graham saying that beautiful line, because Prim, it's like, these are ordinary people doing all this violence. These are people we know that just got twisted and thrown up in a frenzy, because it's like, that's the saddest thing, like, people, just ordinary people, can become the biggest monsters of all. It just takes the wrong thing happening to kind of like spiral you up and turn you into that kind of monsters. And that's, for him, it's like, how do you fight that when there's hatred on all sides? And then you have Graham saying, all you can do in that case is be a good man, because it's like, how do you protect the people that you love from such hatred, and just that's all on one side, and he says, be a good man. And he's like, you, Prim, are a good man. And it's kind of, it was a beautiful thing. And it's what made this whole situation even sadder is that it was all instigated by his brother Manej, like the Holy Man getting killed. It's just because for him, he thought, like, because he believed one thing, he believed that this is the right path, and that basically that their marriage was sacrilegious in a sense. I'm sure that might not be the right word. I guess abomination would kind of be another word, which is even more heartbreaking, because it's like, this is your brother. Even Umbrum is kind of like, I want to think of you as a brother because you sacrificed so much. Your family and my family, we worked the field together, and it's just kind of like, you sacrificed so much for us. Because that's the thing, once again, going back to what I brought up, it's like, you were so close before, but it took one instance in all of India, like that changed everything for you. And it's just kind of sad that it went down like that, because like I said, she thought, it's like, I want to be able to think of you as my brother now that me and Prim are married. And it's just like, dude. And he killed the Holy Man just because, like, oh, a man would, actually agree to kind of officiate your marriage is kind of no man, not a good man at all, essentially. It's kind of interesting because the Doctor actually was the one who officiated, and she gave a very beautiful speech about love, and I thought it was kind of, it's the most, in this instance, you two are the most powerful people in the world, maybe even the universe. And I thought it was kind of, that the beautifulness that is love kind of transcending a lot of stuff. So I thought that was, me being kind of the lovey-dovey person that I am, I really love stuff like that. Don't mean to get all gushy and stuff, but I just thought that was kind of a beautiful speech by the Doctor in that regard. And it's sad, Prim tried to talk his brother down. Even the guy who shot him was someone that, Prim knew. It's like, we literally served together, and this is what happens. And it's just, part of me wants to know whatever happened to Prim's brother in that regard. He might not be alive anymore. I mean, to be fair, he's like, oh, I get to fight now. And it's kind of like, because he even said, like, our older brother would side with me. And it's like, you don't know that, because the fact of the matter is, because even Prim was like, this isn't what I fought for. I fought for, kind of what we represented before, like being neighbors, being friends, being who we were, one united group, and just not for us to be divided like we are, And I thought, I don't know, just like I said, it's just like this somber, heartbreaking situation. But it does kind of have this beautifulness to it in a sense of, because it doesn't change what happened, but, Yaz and her grandma bond a little bit, because her grandma's like, do you want to know the story? She's like, maybe some other time, because she's like, her grandma is happy with her life, that even if something tragic like that happened, she was able to go on with her life, and she had Yaz's mom and eventually had Yaz and her sister. So it's kind of like, her life worked out in a beautiful way too, but it's still sucky that these circumstances happen. It makes me wonder, I think it probably didn't play a role in it, but the doctor to a certain extent is kind of a soldier herself. So it makes you wonder, is that why? Even more reason why she wanted to go with Prim. Maybe she thought maybe there, because she knew there wasn't anything she could change, because without undoing so much, and it's just kind of sad, especially because this is someone you've gotten to know, and you see that this is a good person. They don't deserve this, dying simply because they love someone that other people don't agree with. It's such a, I don't know, it's such a sad thing. And I guess, and truth be told is, I don't know if that's, like, I'm not that familiar with Indian culture or history, so that, like, kind of like that being a thing, I don't know how much that pertains to today. Like, I know there are divides, and that's, legitimately, sadly, there's divides everywhere in the world, but I don't know if India is really like that, because, like I said, I will admit, I'm ignorant when it comes to India's history. Like I said, like, you don't really get to learn about other places' histories like that. You dive into it a little bit, like world history here in the U.S. I don't know if, like, other countries really experience. I've brought that up before. I don't know if other countries really experience other countries, history like that. It probably gets brought up a little bit, but then you just kind of, I've talked about it before. It's kind of like it's interesting, because it always makes you wonder, like, what are, because this world has been around for a long time, and every country's got its own history that a person on a day-to-day basis probably wouldn't know. Like I said, this episode taught me about India's history. I knew nothing about that, so I think that was kind of the amazingness of this episode, that it was kind of this teachable moment while also being this sad but loving tale, and just almost kind of like some Romeo and Juliet type of story. And it's sad that things kind of played out this way. I didn't even think about the Romeo and Juliet comparison. Obviously it didn't play out in a Juliet regard, but still, it kind of has almost that feel to it, forbidden love and everything. So it's kind of, I don't know. Like I said, I'm stammering a little bit. I just don't know what else to say. Yeah, I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Charmed. Quite a few things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First of all, the whole Nico situation played out a lot. Like, I figured that was what direction her story was going to take, but obviously it took many different directions I wasn't expecting. For one, I wasn't expecting her to kind of go full-blown investigating this as fast as she did. I thought that might be kind of like an arc that got spread out over a couple episodes. It's like, no, the entire episode, well, her side of things were kind of dedicated to it in this episode. Her, looking into Trip, because apparently Trip had looked into Marisol, the girl's mom, her death as well as other deaths, and it's like, oh, okay, so he had caught on to, like, the other elder deaths that, Charity had talked about last episode, which is like, how did he draw that conclusion is the biggest question. Like, I guess their deaths were maybe their bodies were similar positions, these suicides, maybe it was literally, maybe the same night, potentially. It might have been like a three-way hit that was caused by whoever, which is interesting too, because obviously we get introduced to two other demons this episode, Hunter as well as his dad, Alistair Kane, which is interesting. Which the thing about that's really interesting is the fact is, they talk about the fact is they're not the ones behind these killings. They're just taking advantage of it. It was like, okay, so you're not the ones killing the elders. And who the hell or what the hell is? That's a whole other question on its own. That really kind of took me by surprise. But nevertheless, Nico ends up going to the cabin, like, she's getting super obsessed, and, like, you already have that situation of Mel feeling guilty because, like, she knows the truth about Trip, and she sees Nico kind of breaking down because of it. It's because it's like, for one, she's being kind of put on leave, and she's starting to doubt herself as a detective, because it's like, oh, I couldn't see the signs of, Trip and stuff like that, so it's like, maybe I'm not that good at my job, and it's just kind of, you see, like, Nico kind of sinking into a depression. and she looks into this investigation. She's even pushing Mel to be like, no, this and that about your mom. It's like, well, you're just going to let your mom stuff go, which is so interesting, considering the fact is Nico was the one pushing Mel so hard to be like, let the stuff of your mom go. But then it's like, now you have Nico being like, now you don't want to push, you just want to kind of accept. It's like, you literally fought so much for me to let it go, and now you want me to go back down that route. I mean, obviously we know why Mel doesn't want Nico to go down that route, because it's like, she knows the truth behind everything now, and she doesn't want Nico to get caught up in all that. I mean, she almost dies later on in the episode because Hunter ends up almost about to kill her. And what's interesting, too, is we ended up learning, well, for one, I guess the more powerful a demon is, the less likely that, well, because we already saw their kind of limits to Mel's freezing ability anyway, but every time she froze Hunter, he freeze a little bit, but then he kind of break through. Also, the fact is, apparently she can't stop Hellfire, because Hellfire is a little kind of like, on the magical side of it, it kind of like knocks back any magic, so it can temporarily freeze up only for like a blink of an eye before like it keeps raging on. So I wonder, is there any way to actually stop Hellfire? What's also interesting is it's bottled up Hellfire. It's not like, I wonder, do any demons in particular spew Hellfire, or is it just one of those things you just kind of collect or something? I mean, it was in a bottle and everything. So, but what I didn't see coming is Mel's solution to all this. I thought it was like, okay, we're going to wipe her memory, but it's like, no, because even if they wipe her memory, it doesn't change the fact is that Nico is a target. Nico's a target because she's neck deep in all of this, like what Trip found, what the demons wanted. You know, it isn't just about the girls being the charm one, like Mel in particular being the charmed one. It's like, no, like Nico is neck deep in some stuff that they couldn't help but be a part of, because this whole Trip doing this investigation and Nico being his partner, they figured she was the easiest thing to get close to it. Even though she didn't really know anything, she knew enough to know her partner, to know potentially where he hid the evidence, which all that kind of burned up. But going back to it, the fact of the matter is how they handle this situation is Mel and the Charmed Ones cast a spell to rewind time, at least their time. Granted, Harry, Mel, Macy, and Maggie will be the only ones who remember the original timeline, but it doesn't change everything. It's just everything pertaining to Nico and Mel. And I thought that was such an interesting thing, because that never came up in the original show, at least not that I know of, because all the people that died around them that knew the truth and stuff like that, because like that probably would have been a handy spell in that regard. I mean, it's kind of a very sad spell in that regard, too, just because, like I said, because it's such a, like, specified rewind, because it's not like, oh, it rewinds the entire world. Like I said, to a certain extent, everything related to Nico and Mel is, because Mel talked about the fact is, if it wasn't for her, Nico wouldn't have transferred to theirs, so none of this would have happened in the first place. So, that's crazy. I mean, that's the thing. With time, once you get down that route, there are a whole bunch of consequences, like Harry was talking about, because the fact of the matter is there's so much stuff with time, like every little thing has a ripple effect. So one ripple effect we see at the end is the fact of the matter is Mel never got her interview at the college, because at the time she was dating Nico, and she slept through her she slept through her alarm, and Nico woke her up. Nico not being in her life, boom, she no longer has a job there, which obviously there's going to be more to it, which is kind of interesting, because it's like this whole spell thing. I'm very interested to find out what other aspects of Mel's life have changed. I mean, obviously, like finding Macy, none of that got affected. I mean, to be fair, I guess it's because the Charmed Ones don't get affected anyway by the rewrite. I'm still curious to see. Well, no, because obviously they are being affected, because Mel in particular. But I wonder, is she the only one that got affected by it? I mean, maybe the ramifications for Maggie and Macy too. But for now, it just seems like it's mainly, seems like Nico is happy. I thought it was kind of a nice little detail, because Maggie's like, why is she wearing fake glasses again? It's like, well, because she went on that whole, like, telling people the truth thing, and because she went on the telling the people truth thing as a part of dating Mel and accidentally eating that truth serum, it made her tell that truth, and now that the truth was out there, she kind of accepted it. So it's kind of interesting, because it's like it kind of made her get a little more self-confident. It's like, no, it's out there, I accept it, people know now, so I don't have to worry about it. But it's like, now she's kind of back to being her self-conscious self. It's like, oh yeah, like, I can't let people know, So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of a double-edged sword that her self-confidence kind of went back down when you kind of think about that, like, too much. But it's just kind of an interesting little detail I thought was kind of nice that they even kind of pointed out too. I thought that was kind of pretty neat. But it does beg the question, like, what is Mel going to do? Like, there might still be a possibility of the two of them crossing paths. It might be very unlikely, but that's going to be a harsh thing to go down, because it's like, you have all your memories of being with her and she doesn't remember anything, which if they ever do bump into each other again, it's kind of like, what are you going to do at that point in time? Because it's like, the whole point of keeping her away like this was to make sure that you never like cross paths, so that she doesn't get dragged in all of this. But then it becomes a situation of like, well, once you're around her, you know, Mel's having a hard time already trying to fight, like trying to like, you know, her urges towards Nico. So it becomes a thing of like, you know, because you know so much about her, that could easily make you fall into almost those habits of wanting to try and get her back, even though you're trying to keep her away for her safety, which is the ultimate question that ends up coming from this. It's like, as the charmed ones, even Macy's kind of saying like, maybe we're not destined to have love. Love is probably like the one thing we're supposed to sacrifice when it comes to this, which that was a huge plot point for literally every one of the charmed ones in the original show too. Like, that was like the biggest struggle all four sisters had, was having a love life, you know? I feel like the one who went through the most, I mean, everyone had their different struggles. I always talk about it. I felt like Piper had it the worst, but to be fair, everyone had it pretty rough on her. Because I always forget to talk about the fact is, yeah, Piper had Leo, but Phoebe had the whole Cole situation, so it's a little different. It's like, dating a white letter, it's pretty bad. It's like, dating a demon is pretty bad, too. So it's kind of like, you know, splitting hairs at that point in time. But also, like, I feel like, I could be remembering it wrong, but like Phoebe went through the most different relationships over the course of the series. I don't think Paige went through that many. I don't think Prue did in that time. I think the only person I remember her dating was Andy. Maybe she dated someone else. I'm not remembering. I remember that's that whole like astral projection situation, but I forgot what that was all about. Was that just some bad boy she was dating or something at a time? Yeah, but and Piper was pretty consistent. She dated Leo, and there was like a few other guys, but it wasn't like nearly to the extent like Leo. But Phoebe like actively dated for a while over the course of the series, so it's just kind of an interesting thing. I'm curious to see kind of how the show, the reboot, kind of handles that whole relationship aspect, because on one side of things you had the whole Maggie situation, which is interesting because Lucy is asking her, Parker apparently broke up with her, which is interesting. And it's like, I need you to investigate and find out who it is that Parker cheated on me, because I know he said it's not you, it's me. And it's like, no. The only reason why he'd ever do that if there was another woman, and now Maggie basically has to track down an imaginary woman because she knows the other woman is herself, and that's a complicated situation all on its own. And then it turns out, oh, hey, what about you and Parker? I'm interested to see, like, will she actually try and date Parker now? Because they could potentially do it, because when it was ultimately all said and done, Maggie ended up telling Lucy the truth after Lucy had a breakdown. I was like, is this really devastating her like that? I mean, like, Lucy could come off a little coldish and just kind of insensitive, but that, you know, she's still a human being. She still cares and loves, and Parker broke her heart. But even Parker was like, the fact of the matter is, Maggie, I had you in my head all the time. Like, it's not right for me to date Lucy, and I've got these feelings like that. And it's like, yeah, it's understandable. It's just a sucky situation. Because even Maggie's like, the fact of the matter is, I kissed him because I wanted to. I could have distracted him any other ways. The reason I kissed him was because I wanted to, and I finally came to realize that. And it's just sucky because it's like, hey, Parker kind of like, the way Parker introduced himself to her, it's like, come on, dude. It's not like you were, like, presenting yourself as a dude who had a girlfriend. You were more so presenting yourself as like a dude who might have been available. That's kind of what was kind of hinting at the first time you met, when you both clicked like that. But hey, maybe that's just me. Maybe I read the situation wrong. I'm pretty sure Maggie read the situation wrong in that regard too. But I didn't know how I was really expecting, because Maggie said she was going to tell her, but the moment was all coming down to it, because Lucy's like, oh, the fact of the matter is my mom's alone, I'm going to be alone, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh. She's like, I drive all men away. It's like, how are you going to handle this, Maggie? Is something else going to come up? Because then you had, like, Lucy being like, the fact of the matter is, kind of going along with all that was kind of like, there is no other woman, isn't it? It's just me. And it's like, Maggie did the right thing, because if she didn't, Lucy would have just lost her damn mind. Like, she would have driven herself crazy with all this guilt over something that wasn't her fault. That, you know, Maggie's like, it's my fault. Which now, it kind of screws up everything, because Lucy was Maggie's friend. Like, even with their complicated situation, it's like Lucy was kind of thought of her as a sister, the whole Kappa thing, because she's like, you know, made Maggie feel even guilty, but when she hugged her, it's kind of like, oh, thank God I can trust Maggie. And it's like, it's sticking the dagger in even deeper. But now it's like, Lucy wants nothing to do with her. It's like, oh, wait, because you have feelings for him? Oh, the fact of the matter is, why didn't you tell me sooner? Oh, you just wanted me to squirm and come in at that to the point I had to ask you for help. It's like, no, she just had such a guilty conscience over it. She didn't want to hurt you, but now it's kind of done. So things are probably going to get worse for Maggie just because it's like, well, it's a sorority. Lucy's kind of got a vendetta. I don't think that's going to end well because Lucy legitimately seems like the vindictive type that just from her personality we've seen so far, it's kind of like almost like, yeah, if you're not on her side, she seems very cutthroat in me. So I'm thinking that's what we're going to see her kind of basically kind of like a smear campaign against Maggie is kind of what I'm inkling towards with this situation. But we'll kind of have to ultimately wait and see what happens with that. Like I said, Parker and Maggie can date now, but the fact of the matter is Lucy was like, oh, basically she was going to destroy Parker, make it so that everyone knows how much of a douche she is. So it's like I said, I'm sure she's going to take all that rage and hatred. Probably some still aimed at Parker, but more so probably going to be all aimed at Maggie. Like I said, we'll have to wait and see. Well, on the other side of things, really quickly, I'm going to talk about the fact is that there's the whole Harry situation. I'm going to quickly interject with that because apparently Harry doesn't remember any aspects of his human life. Apparently, when you become a white lighter, that second chance in life means giving up all your memories of your previous life because that could be used as a distraction. And it's like, wow, because that never happened with Leo. In fact, Leo's past literally came back to haunt him in the show, in the original show. So it's kind of like, that one kind of took me by surprise. I was like, oh man, that sucked. Because it's kind of like a, not really amnesia situation. It's more like a, oh, I chose to give up my memories. So it's a decision that, Harry made that he doesn't know if it could ever be reversed. But he did have that sweet moment of Maggie being like, well, we can be your new family. And it's like, stop being adorable, guys. Come on. I thought that was kind of pretty neat. But what was also, interested to see what they do with that, Because that's such an interesting aspect. Because that means, well, once again, I'm about to say Charity's an elder. Once again, I don't know if it works the same. Well, no, obviously it doesn't because, look at Marisol. Marisol wasn't a white lighter. She was an elder just because she was a witch. So I keep thinking because, like I said, in my head, the elders were white lighters in the original series. So them just being regular witches kind of messes my head a little bit because I guess all white lighters are just kind of like the angel substitutes in the show who are just the protectors, just like they kind of were in the original show. But like I said, plus they were elders too. So there's that whole thing. Unless I'm getting that wrong, do remind me. But I'm pretty sure the elders were all white lighters. I've said this the second or third episode in a row, but I could be misremembering it. Once again, it's been a very long time since I've sat down and watched the show, especially early episodes where they kind of explained all the basics of this witch world, witch demon monster world. So we'll see. And then finally, there's the whole Macy situation because it's like, oh yeah, Galvin's with someone else, which even I'm admitting yo, isn't this even Maggie was like, ain't it only been a couple days since you guys were making out hardcore? And it's I'm like, yeah, how could he have moved on quickly? I was like, there's you can't tell me she's not a succubus. Is it going to be Macy doesn't think she's a succubus, but it turns out she is a succubus? That's what I was kind of going for because I was like, it does seem a little suspicious. He's a little tired and everything like that. I'm like, oh, well, it could be that whole thing of oh, you're in a new relationship, so you're basically doing it all the time. That's what I kind of chalked it up to as well because even the dude there, I forgot his name that was talking to Macy was kind of oh yeah, come on, she's super hot and everything. And she's like, we're at work. What's his name? Victor? I think his name was Victor. And he's got, I'm sorry, but it's man. Also, side note, the actress who plays Summer, she looks so familiar. That wouldn't be the actress who played Brayden on Teen Wolf, is it? I'm sitting here thinking about that. I'm legitimately trying to remember. I feel like that might be the same actress. It kept bugging me the entire episode. I'm I kind of feel like I've seen her somewhere. I think that might be what I know her from. Might not be, but that's currently at the top of my head with that. So that's kind of interesting. But in the end, it does turn out that Summer isn't one. I love it because the moment certain things started popping up, I'm this is a little weird because it's what about, because it's oh, the tramps, well, what Maggie called a tramp stamp. I don't want to be the one kind of calling what tattoo she has as a tramp stamp. I don't feel comfortable being that because I was about to say that. I was that's kind of wrong. Don't say that. But the tattoo she has of wings and the tail. I was oh, in plain sight. I was come on, you got to admit that's kind of a stretch. But to be fair, hey. There was also the tattoo that the mark she saw on Galvin. And I was like, oh, so it is real. Like, I was like, okay, so we're going to think she isn't, but it's going to turn out that she is one. Turns out she's not. When Maggie and Macy show up, they cast a spell on her that doesn't work. And it's like, oh. And she even tried to do the nice thing of kind of bailing Macy out of it, being like, yeah, she came over here to bring me my wallet. Aren't they so nice? And it's like, oh. It sucks. I mean, because Galvin ended up pointing out the fact there's a reason why this happened, because it's like, well, you kept turning me down over and over again. Because I guess legitimately in his head, it was like, no, she's just making excuses. She doesn't want to go further. It's just because I guess for him, it's like when we made out, she had made excuse after excuse, and now that it's happened, and she's still making excuses. It's like, no, legitimately, she had family things to do. But then again, I guess for him, it's like the fact that you couldn't make time for me anyway kind of says a lot. But it's like, hey, she's got a lot on her plate. Now she's going to be even more reluctant to go in a relationship because it's like, oh, see what happens there. Once again, things didn't work out for Mel and Nico, so it's kind of like, hey, maybe there's no future for me and Galvin either, just because things are complicated on that front too. So it does turn out that tattoo is something else. Because the most interesting thing is, apparently only Macy could see it. They couldn't see it. Even Maggie couldn't see it. So it's like, maybe because they have a tie, there's a bond there. Maybe because Galvin hasn't completely gotten over Macy, so there's some part of his heart that still cares about her. So whoever did that to him, whatever that is and what it represents, could be a sign of like anyone that is in this has this deep connection in Galvin's heart can see it potentially, which I guess could also be a sad thing because it could also mean like, oh, I guess Summer doesn't mean that much to him if she can't, that type of thing. So I don't know. We are most likely going to find out next episode what it's all about. I was thinking that that's what was connected to it because there was that symbol that Nico had discovered under Tripp's files, but Mel had talked about like, oh, this weird symbol, we have to draw it. I'd assumed when that came out, I was like, oh, isn't that going to be connected to the symbol that's on Galvin? Maybe it will be, maybe it won't. The fact is they didn't make such a point to go ahead and introduce that this episode. Maybe there's going to be something they save for next episode. But still, I don't know. Like I said, the thing I'm most walking away from this episode is like, what other ripple effects will there be? Like unintended consequences. That's what happens when you come to changing time. That's why you should not do that. So, also it turns out that Alistair and Hunter want powerful witch DNA. That's why they were going after the elder DNA. But the moment they did that, like it undid everything. So the elder DNA disappeared because Nico was never there. Tripp never found it, and that never led to Nico finding it. So that's a whole thing all in itself. Which begs the question, it kind of brought up an interesting conversation too, because it's like, oh yeah, now that all these demons are in town, the police force are never safe either. And it's like, that never came up too much in the original series, like other cops being worried about this situation. Like unless you were Andy or Daryl. There's the whole Kyle situation, when she had his past situation with what were those dudes called again? They're the ones Leo hooked up with. And Cole was one for a while. Were they the ancient ones? I forgot. They were trying to build that whole utopia world. That whole storyline. I'm blanking on what they're called. The Avatars? Was that it? Dude, I don't remember. It's so long ago. But remember the dudes, the people, powerful beings that were trying to make a perfect utopia. Like Kyle was connected to it because they killed someone that was important to him. I want to say it was his family. Like I said, Cole was with them for a while, and then eventually Leo joined them, and he kind of kept that secret from everyone. But that's diving into the original show, so I actually don't remember what set me off on that tangent. It's not coming back to me, and it must not have been that important potentially. But nevertheless, getting back to what I think I was talking about earlier, is the whole aspect of like, hey, Alistair needs witch DNA for something. What in particular? We have no idea. And now he's going to use this connection with Macy because he works at, some biotech place that's interested in a lab that Macy's working at. So get the powerful witch DNA they want from the Charmed Ones, because apparently the Charmed Ones are getting more and more powerful. The fact is they're casting a time reversal spell like that. So, what is essentially kind of a time reversal spell. Like I said, I'm very excited to see what goes down in the next episode, to see where all of this takes us. But really, that's all I'm willing to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.